Hello and welcome to the Pig Daily. We are back. We're doing a Pig Daily again. We don't do the show daily anymore, but it's still called the Pig Daily. We're not even giving them episode numbers. Once again, we're looking at Serral being amazing in GSL versus the world. Thank you very much, Blizzard, for sharing these replays with me. So we're going to do a little analysis. Now, last time we watched Serral in the opposite spawn on this map up against Maru. He was down here. And we talked about how he did a very sort of standard rule of one gas build, but he had a lot of details that allowed him to shut down Serral's pressure, Maru's pressure, absolutely. He got in a really good spot, crushed the first push, and was infinitely ahead. And though it took him another 10 minutes or so to finish the game out, it was kind of done and dusted pretty early. It was a pretty straightforward map. Now, this time around, Serral was facing Innovation, and I believe this was the round of 8. So this was actually a best of 5. This was the map which people were like, please look at this map. I need to see this map. You know, we feel like this is the closest map of a standard game where Serral was under a lot of pressure. Let's take a look at it. So the changes here are, what does it look like when he's under pressure? Oh, look at that. Look at that spread. You see the spread on the lings? And notice he just keeps running them backwards. A single ling goes in, half the Hellions fire, and then he goes in. And then he's going to pull back, yeah. Because if he chases there, his lings would have clumped up in that little corner there. They all would have clumped up trying to get around there. And a Hellion volley would have roasted them. So I love how Serral consistently defends so damn well. Oof. And even this Liberator just gets dicked. So that Lib goes down. The Hellions do come in. But Serral's lings just, they remind me a little bit of Life's Zerglings. Raynor's kind of the same as well, where he just defends very well. But nonetheless, this is not as disastrous as the Banshee dying when Maru is playing, right? We kind of fast forward. Innovation's macro is lit, I believe is the technical term the kids are using today. The third command center's finished. He hasn't missed a beat with his macro. He's got 3 barracks up. He's already got Marines and tanks moving out. There's going to be no delay on that third base. And yeah, this time around, even though Serral's spreading creep, he's got a quick 4th. He's still doing a rule of 1 gas build. At least I think he was anyway, looks like it. With the speed of all the hatcheries going down. He's just not as far ahead as he was versus Maru. The Hellion Liberator commitment a lot lower than the double Banshee with Cloak that Maru went for. And Innovation killed like a few more lings. Forced a few more lings. Killed 2 drones. Wasted a little bit of mining time. Wasn't a lot of damage, but even that little bit for a lesser investment adds up. Now Innovation comes in, does his nice double drop, and just kind of stems forward there. Serral, as always, flanks. I don't think this kid knows how to not flank his opponent. Looking at his map control, very nice as well. He's got these spotting overlords. Always, always, always. And he immediately respreads creep wherever it gets cleared. Now, this is the moment where he actually builds 12 drones. So he says, look, I've defended your first double drop pressure. Drone the 4th. Same thing that he always does. And I haven't like planned out exactly what we're doing today, by the way, guys. This is going to be very, very free-flowing as we look at this. 2-2 is slightly behind Innovations. There's drops coming through. He's got to get the queens out of there. Now, as the Ling Bane comes forward, he says, my queens can go forward and replace the creep. Loses his 2 queens that have energy. And that's really friggin' bad, because he wants to put down like 4 tumors here and quickly respread this. Luckily, still has 3 creep tumors there. Still has 1 in the north. Still has 1 active here. But he immediately has to pull 2 more queens. So what he does there, let's take a look. Pretty sure he pulls his injecting queens. Let's see. Yeah, so he had an injecting queen, or at least a new queen that had popped out on the 4th, and then he also grabs the inject. Where'd the other one come from? I want to check. So his queens go down. That's one. Pulls this queen, right? Pretty sure he pulls that queen, yeah? I didn't even know where that queen came from. Oh, it came from this base. Right, so it was just the queen on the 4th and the queen on the 3rd. Okay, cool, cool. Yeah, super standard. So he's throwing those back into his creep control group. You notice he has 2 queen control groups. So his defense queens, most important unit after his Ling Bane in the early game, has them here. And already, he knows there's going to be another push coming in the near future because Innovation wants to, of course, set up for the 2-2 pound of Marine tank. But Serral actually is like, all right, I'm going to go for a big counter attack here. I'm going to go set that up. My other units are grouping up here, and we often see this same split. He's got group 1, which he's adding his army into, his new units, Hydras that are coming out, movement speed first, not range, Lings, Banes, Queens, all together here, trying to fight this. And he's got that counter attack on group number 4, just waiting over there. Baneling's ready to bust through. But he's just kind of like, just here, just playing a chill game. He's playing a normal game, trying to respread creep. Innovation's doing it, and he's trying to set up. He does eventually add that second gas in the main base as well. He added that about a minute or 2 earlier. I don't know. Yeah, and then the Ling Bane comes in. But Innovation holds steady there with that siege tank. So he goes for the third base, gets a few SCV kills, nothing massive. And we're going to see this drop. It looks like he was shifting to send a counterattack around the left-hand side, or at least shifting to prepare for a push. But he's also got 2 spores, which I love on this map. You see all the pros do this now, where they're just like, look, the drop from there down here is just so annoying. Problem is Serral pulled his entire army for this, and this was a mistake. 100%. You should not have pull your whole army for that. And this allows Innovation to just cleave right through and siege up 6 siege tanks with this bio on this base. And now even as Serral is trying to set up this flank, he's like, ah, oh, fuck it. How the fuck does he get that surround set up so quickly? He's Serral, he's a god, but he knows he needs to bust that position, right? And he manages to take it down there just absolutely fucking beautifully. Just instantly says, look, I can't lose that hatch, goes for it, crushes it down. And this is where I feel like Serral fucks up hugely. By going across the map with this whole army like this, and I feel like he kept expecting Innovation to shift and start pushing his army to the north. But this is a huge mistake from Serral, and this is what costs him a lot of ground in this game. Because he was in such a good position after he reset the tank count. Now another tank push. Not that many tanks, but a ton of bio is able to get there together. His Ling counterattack is going to kill some SCVs, but that's actually not important right now, because Innovation is playing a very high pressure style I'm going to analyze in a moment and explain to you guys. Where Innovation does not want to play the late game at all. He's like wanting to kill him on 3 base. And then Serral actually decides there that he has to give up that base. And that was a really good call. So let's go back and analyze that little moment there. So first things first. Moving across the map. Really bad choice with his army. He also didn't set up any spotters down here. I guess because he knew Innovation's army would be there. But you can see here, his creep is being pushed back really far. His queen count is just dicked. He's trying to replace queens, but he's lost too many of his fundamental things. Now, let's look at how he breaks that previous push. Did he actually pull queens in to tank? Is that why he lost the queens? I think it was. Oh no, once again he left queens down there. Okay, that's a mistake he normally doesn't make. So here's what you guys want to apply as a Zerg player. Every time you respread creep, you want to build a mechanical habit where when you spread creep tumors, what you do is you go creep, 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 and then you shift click your queen back to somewhere around your rally point, somewhere safe. If you don't do that, your queens are gonna, a random drop will come in and stim and just kill them. In this case, it's the main army, and they're left out in the middle of no man's land, which is really bad. These are expensive to replace, but it's not just about the expense, it's about the momentum you lose with your creep spread. Not having creep being replaced there quickly enough is so bad. It really sucks. Now, I do think this position here, if Innovation was able to reinforce another like 30, 40 Marines or something, or if he had like a big reinforce that flanked in on this, Serral would have been in a massive amount of trouble, right? So if he didn't bust this as quickly as he did, he probably would have been dicked. But that was just such a beautiful little engagement there. And then he's like, frack, replace queens. He's trying to pull injecting queens to replace creep tumors. He's like, oh my god, the south side of the map just looks like shit right now. This is not what you want as a Hydra-ling Bane player. Hydra Bane is so reliant on creep spread to be effective. And Innovation is just powering out these tanks, this bio. Moving across the north side of the map, big mistake in my mind. I think he should have been in the middle of the map looking to slow down Innovation's push, force the siege up. Because now he does end up having to give up this base. Now looking at this, why didn't he just collapse on it? He looks like he wants to, right? But he actually pulls back and pussies out. Now, looking at what Serral can see, I think this is really smart because he's got no Zerglings on this side at all. literally 0 lings. He's got a pack of lings there, but they're going to be kind of running in one direction. Half of his banelings aren't finished morphing. You need enough banelings on both sides so that, say the Marines start a step to the right. If you've only got like 2 banelings and they get gunned down, the Marines can just start a step on top of the Hydras and Lings on that flank and just gun them down, while your banelings are like running in from the other flank and going, fuck, the Marines are all the way over here. And your Marines have to chase, and they're going to get gunned down in the meantime. So you've got to make sure you have the right balance. You also want to have Zerglings on both sides to absorb more tank shots, as well as to get on any Marines. If there was like 20, 30 Lings over here, Serral might have just jumped on this tank, a couple of Marines and Marauders, kind of moved down here. The Hydra Bane can sort of zone out the bio in this area, and he might have been able to do that. But as it was, he was just like, shit, man, I just don't have all my pieces in position. This is actually a terrible fight if I go for this. And even though his Lings did a little bit of damage over there, he got 8 worker kills, he decides to give up the base. And because he's already got a 5th up, that's actually okay. It's just in about a minute's time, as his natural, his natural's actually already lost almost half the mineral patches. And then as this base loses its patches, which is still about 3 minutes away or so, 3-4 minutes, that's where he desperately will need a 5th base. So he'll need to re-establish this one where that army is. Keep sending Lings across the map, keeps on looking for those angles to intercept reinforcements, and he's not necessarily headbutting with those attacks. Like, at any point, if Serral wasn't finding value with these Ling counters, he would just bring them back. And this is something Serral does all the time. But in this game, because Innovation is constantly reinforcing with like very small amounts of units, he feels a pressure to try and finish Serral off. He actually ends up doing this thing where he keeps coming out with small numbers of units or not having that many units at home, and Serral's like, okay, I can take this trade. Like, this is way better than fighting your army front on. And the more you can do that stuff, the more you're gonna be able to take care of your opponent's situation. By the way, guys, I actually totally forgot we were gonna do something different in today's show, and apparently my frantic lunch break just totally threw me off. So, guys, do we have any mods around? Jaden, you down to hop on Discord with me, my man? So the reason I want to do this is very simple. I realized there's something I wanted to do to make it better. Hop in, if I could have a mod or two, hop in Discord with me, and just every now and then read a question from chat would be great. I'm gonna just hop in a coaching channel, which they're open to anyone. But obviously I don't want any randoms in there. I'll kick you guys out. But yeah, if Jaden or one of my other mods could hop on Discord with me and help me out by just reading out some questions from chat, that'd be great. Okay. So at this point, Serral says, you know what? I've still got a robust economy. I've got +3 carapace. I've just made, oh, he actually canceled. I think his burrow was making on that hatch, so he lost his burrow. Otherwise, he'd be burrowing banelings right now as well. 100% in these down and dirty games. But he's basically saying, shit, man, I need to reestablish my creep spread. So no matter how messy a game gets, you are all in if you're not spreading creep. And this is something a lot of Zerg players either don't get or don't have the mechanics to truly embrace. And it's something which Serral always embraces. Even though he's lost his queens multiple times through a bit of sloppiness. Let's find his queen count. They're all injecting right now, but he's going to group a few of them up and send them off to spread creep in the near future. Because he realizes that right now, this southern side of the map, taking a base there is actually just like a shit idea right now. Because units can come in and just take good engages. Like, you can't take good engages with Hydra Bane off creep. Not when there's a good tank count. Now, that's the problem for Innovation in this scenario. There isn't a good tank count. There isn't a good Marauder count. Innovation's actually playing a 6 reactor, or is it 5 or 6 reactors? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's a 6 reactor, very kind of all in on 3 base style of play. But Serral basically says, look, let's backstab. Let's try to keep you at home. Let's buy time. Let's respread creep. And he actually adjusts here and says, this base is friggin' shit, but my creep is already in this direction. So if I can get this like 1 more creep tumor here, and like 1 or 2 more creep tumors down to here, suddenly this base is way more defensible, which is why he went for this. Now, he didn't think Innovation would get up here so quickly and start to fuck him. If there was like 6 siege tanks here, Serral would be really like, oh, this is, I gotta land the perfect blinding clouds to take this out. Like, this is gonna be really hard. But as it is, he counterattacks with a huge number of Zerglings here, realizing that any frontal engagement, unless Innovation derps on a creep, is probably gonna favor Innovation. What he really wants to do with his army is slow down Innovation and say, hey, look at me, I got Hydra Bane. Siege your tanks, slow down, give me time to get more upgrades, to get Vipers, to eventually get Ultras out, to get Adrenal Glands, all these sort of things, right? He wants that time, but the Hydra Bane off creep, you don't really want to be fighting with it, so he's like, fuck it, man. Just grab every Zergling, which is what he actually did that. He sent every single Ling out of his army. You'll notice all he's got is the Lings that he's producing and starting to make more Banelings. And he goes in and he's taking these reasonably good trades on the other side of the map. That one wasn't as perfect as it could have been, but that opens it up so a few Banelings can get in. Innovation is very, very quick, so he manages to hang on. +3 melee not done, so it doesn't one-shot SCVs. And then here Serral says, wait a second, there's just not that many tanks. That's a pure Marine army. You know what? He looked at that army and he said, wait a second. Without tanks, that's basically a Marine ball, just abducts both of the tanks, jumps on it, and Innovation's going to run out of steam. The thing is, Innovation had to just keep pushing, and he had to keep kind of going, because that's how this style works. It's so momentum-based. The thing is, without the siege tanks, and losing them twice, as he did in the mid-game, losing every single siege tank while taking counterattack damage, it created this scenario where now he's like, well, I've got libs, I'm ready for your ultras, and Serral's like, I don't even have ultras. Yes, they're amazing versus the Marines, but guess what? You don't even have enough tanks to cover your Marines, so just Lingbane Hydra plus some Vipers here is going to deal with this. Abducts all the Liberators, which yanks them out of their siege mode. There's not enough tanks on the ground. And the Banelings can simply overwhelm. There's just not enough support for those Marines and Marauders. At the same time, he was counterattacking as well. What's cool here, I think, more than anything, is how he calibrates kind of when he's taking his fights and that sort of thing. And at this point, he said, you know, okay, like, I think he sent this army off before he was aware of this army, or did he just realize that the push was coming very slowly? Okay, yeah. So let's look at Serral's camera at this point. It's always funny watching things from Serral's camera. So at this point, he says, all right, you're going to slow push here. I literally can't defend this position. So what does Serral do to respond to that? He says, well, I can slow you down for a long time. My Vipers might be able to bust you if you come too deep. As far as he knows, there's 6 siege tanks here. You know, there's a big army. It's also something he doesn't want to take that engage unless he's really ready for it. So he's very frantically like, fuck, I need to be able to run my drone somewhere if this base goes down. Quickly puts a hatch down. And he also says, let's split my army up. Yeah, I can't just take a fight on your terms running down this choke point. Obviously, if the bio wall comes up here, then suddenly it's okay. That's why, you know, Innovation kind of needs to wait for the creep to recede, and he kind of feels forced to press the issue, which is why he's kind of coming forward. And yeah, so Serral was like, I'm going to go counterattack, and then he's like, actually, I'm just going to jump on you. Breaks that hold, and then he immediately has already split off this army. Now, he was thinking about doing that before, wasn't he? Before that fight started, I think he'd already put that on a different control group. Check this out. Look at the control groups, guys. So there's only 4 Banelings. That's his counterattack squad or his flanking squad, right? And that control group 4 that Serral has, it always shifts. Sometimes it's a counterattack squad, sometimes it's a flanking squad. Okay. I want you guys to see when he decides to split that army up. I think it's before the fight's even done. He already decides to split his army. So he's chasing him down. He's just kind of casually A-moving everything. Doop-de-doop, you know, moving forward, jumping on stuff. Trying to click the Hydras on the medevacs where possible. And then he immediately is like, yeah, I want to be pushing 2 sides at once. Because I still don't have great control of this map or great creep spread. But I've got the powerful army. So he immediately there just grabs half of those units, puts them on number 4, sends them down to the south side and says, you know what? Next time you push, I'm going to backstab you with a shitload of stuff. I know you're barely on 3 bases. You're not going to be well set up on the defense. There's urgency for you to push in and finish this game. So let's take it out. You guys got any good questions for me? I see Plox and Jaden in here. How you guys doing?
So I wanted to see Serral's initial scouts and how he reacts to them.
Cool. Don't think there was too much reacting. We did that a lot in the last one. Can you find another one? I might go back and look over that, but any other questions? Especially earlier, because I think people have been asking them for quite a while.
Mineral field depleted.
Oh, people are asking me like about enhancers and stuff, lol.
Oh yeah, people ask random StarCraft questions. Did you want it to be related to the game, since you I assume this is going on YouTube?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, okay, yeah, guys, ask questions as we go. and point out things and stuff, and even just people pointing out cool shit that happens. You know, go ahead and just grab any of that. So keep an eye on that. I'll go back and look at the scouting in a moment. This game finishes up, rolls over that side, rolls over the third. And let's go back before we look at the scouting, and I want to actually talk about Innovation's build, because this is something Innovation does quite a bit, and it gets me a little bit excited. And that is Innovation saying, I'm going to kill you on 3 base, I don't want to play late game. Terran vs. Zerg, fuck that shit. So what he does is a very standard opening, right? I'm not going to even talk about it that much. It was a Hellion Liberator pressure, it's one of the most common. You get a 3rd command center, you get 3 barracks, you get your double upgrades. This is all normal. What is not normal is how many reactors he gets, and how quickly he goes up to 8 barracks. So normally you'll go 1 tech lab, 4 reactors. And then a lot of people will play 2 factories. They will love to play a 2nd factory, tons of siege tanks rallying in. Some people have even played 3 factory. Shout out to Hut vs. Mio Micah. But what we're essentially seeing here is him go into an incredibly fast 8 barracks, which is going to give him an endless bio reinforce, but not just that, he's going to go for mass reactors here. Hold on a sec. You good? My wallet? What do you need it for? Yeah, I got cash. Stealing my money. GG. Girlfriend. Dot just stole some of my money, guys. She just came in. She's looking around my room. I was like, what are you doing? She's like, trying not to interrupt. And I'm like, what do you want? She's like, I'm looking for your wallet. I'm like, what? And then I hand it to her. Look at me. What an idiot. So anyway, as I was saying, guys, 3 more barracks, but not just that, only a 2nd tech lab. So normally people would go a reactor here as well, but he's like, nah, I'm going to get a tech lab and start double Marauder production. So I'm like, I'm going to get a decent Marauder count. But normally you'd get 3 more or 2 more tech labs afterwards, so you'd have at least 3 or 4 Marauder production at a time. Innovation's like, nah, man, triple reactor. What? Triple... On top of the 3 he's already got, that's 6 reactors, means he can build 12 Marines, 2 Marauders at a time. That plus non-stop tank production, non-stop medevac production, and then he can swap into libs once he hits like maybe 10, 12 medevacs. But the idea here is he's just going to keep trying to overwhelm with an almost pure bio force. It's like just like masses of bio. Yeah, there's a bit of siege tanks, but it's just more bio than you normally would have. Not just that, he's using up every single spare bit of minerals he can. So because of this, notice he doesn't have the 6th gas on the 3rd base, and he doesn't need it either. And he's literally just going to dump a crazy amount of resources into Marauders and Marines. And often you'll see someone on double tank production, and at some point with their 5 barracks, they're naturally like, hey, I can squeeze a 4th command center in. Let's expand. Innovation's game plan, whenever he plays this style, is we're never going to grab a 4th command center. Like, there's no. I've lost the game if we get to that point. Because if they get ultras out, like, yeah, if he's got enough momentum, he'll have a few liberators out. He'll still have his tanks alive. He can kind of deal with it with like 2 barracks Marauder production. But he needs to be forward, killing bases, curtailing the Zerg's economy, keeping them on the back foot, clearing creep. He absolutely needs to be doing that. Because if they come out with a big ultra wave and he's only got like a few tanks and maybe 2 libs and a few Marauders, he's mostly Marine focused. Marines suck versus ultras. So that's one reason it sucks. The other reason is just generally speaking, you're going to be building a lot more fucking Marines out of 6 reactors non-stop. So you just don't have any spare money to take an expansion. This allows him to basically just push a little bit harder, a bit more tempo, a bit more momentum. And I think the one thing which Innovation maybe doesn't respect as much as he probably should is how valuable the tanks are with this style. Or maybe he just simply thinks he can get a bit more done than he actually can, but you just can't replace your tanks quickly with this style. And that's really what ends up costing him. Because as powerful as this push is, and as Terran, I get it, you want to push with 2-2 and a lot of bio. And he's like, yeah, I caught you out of position with that double drop in the north. Let's go forward and get this sick position and get the damage and keep the tempo going. He just doesn't have a lot of Marines here. If you look at the numbers of this push, that's 21 Marines, 2 Marauders, and a Hellbat, and a Rando Reaper with 6 kills, by the way. Hats off to that guy for living this entire game. And this 6 tanks is like 6, it's like 5, what is it, the last 4.5 minutes of non-stop tank production. And it's going to take him until like the 13-minute mark to replace these tanks. Should Innovation have played it just a little bit slower? It's hard to say because It's such a momentum-focused style. He wants to trade. He wants to keep Serral on the back foot, and then he just kind of almost overwhelms with a constant reinforcer bio. What is 100% sure about this style is Innovation is putting on a crazier amount of pressure. And even though Serral, once again, just takes these amazing trades like that one, we could argue Innovation didn't have as many Marines as he wanted. Innovation coming back here still ended up taking out that base eventually, remember. Yeah, I think Serral really screwed up because he's lost his queens too many times and he doesn't respread his creep, and because of that he sends like 90% of his army across the map, and these units are like, oh shit, you're already here, I didn't even see you moving forward, crap, I gotta send most of my army home and get ready to flank. Remember what we talked about, this is a counterattack squad, this army. So let's go back, I'm gonna show you guys this cool thing that Serral does once again, over and over. It's just the smoothness with which he changes the goal of these units. So notice how there is 37 units. Oh, actually, it was his main army on the left, hey. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this was... He really just thought Innovation was going to rotate to the top side. So he kind of shifts his control groups and says, this is actually my drop defense, and I'm going to go and, like, look for the aggression and pull you home on the north side. And he wasn't expecting another push to come out quite as quickly as that. But he very quickly changes his control groups. So what he does... is he's grabbed, he's probably even he might have F2'd and gone shift 4 or control group steal onto 4, adding those to number 1. So he's grabbed everything and then he's boxed just the lings that were with this army over here and he's put those on control group 4. So he's grabbed all these units, stolen them back into the main army and said, you guys keep counterattacking, everyone else get the fuck out of there, go home. Arguably, if he committed with the Hydra Bane there, he would have crashed in and just been able to finish the game. If the Hydra Bane got into the third and the natural at the same time, there was not a lot of units at home. And he wouldn't have had a lot of units to crash in on Innovation, but he ends up having to give it up anyway. He doesn't end up crashing through this until Innovation gets a little bit too horny and moves everything forward into this tight little cramped area. So Innovation feels a little bit forced to commit here, and this is where Serral, of course, flanks around the left and comes in from two sides. Or actually, does he? He does it from one side, doesn't he? If I remember correctly. Oh yeah, because he gets the blinding cloud on 3 out of the 4 tanks, and Serral's like, well, yeah, your siege tanks. I'm just gonna kill your tanks with my Hydraling Bane. Always control clicking his Banelings and clicking them forward, and he cleans that up. Jesus, Serral's such a god, man. I really thought he was under more pressure in this game. People were like, yeah, Serral versus Innovation, how'd he come back in that game? And then I like watched the replay this morning, but I kind of glanced through it and I was like, oh yeah, Serral was close to dead in this game. And I'm watching it now and I'm like, you're an idiot, pig. You were half asleep when you watched this replay this game. Serral just fucking styled on Innovation, man. He played really, really, really good. Yeah. We got any discussion from the Twitch chat? What's going on, my boys?
People are asking, does Terran struggle versus Zerg in the late game, or is that just his playstyle?
That's like a loaded question. I actually have signed a contract with Blizzard to pretend the game is balanced when it's not, guys. So I'm not allowed to complain about Terran being weak. No, seriously, obviously, it's a matter of perspective. I think most people would argue Terran is the race which has the most issues in the late game. The big problem that happens for a lot of Terran players is they've got to shift into a much more turtle-y style, and their units are very immobile. A good point Beastie Cutie actually had it in his video about swapping away from Terran is that Terran don't have a lot of splash damage in the late game, because siege tanks are the main one, right? And they're very, very immobile. So that's why if your opponent screws up, you don't have like mobile splash damage, and that's probably why Terran kind of ends up being such a static race when you go to that super late game. We've seen Maru play so many comebacks, right? Where he's like, oh shit, I'm really far behind, I gotta play the late game, and he just starts like building planetary fortress walls, and he just spreads tanks across his 4 bases, and he takes like the slowest 5th, and he's just like got his ghosts everywhere, and he's just like moves forward with the ghosts, snipes a few units, moves back behind the planetary fortresses and the turrets. It's a slower style where it loses any momentum you've got in the game if you swap into that. It really is a slower build-up into your late game unit. So Broodlords and Ultras specifically, once they get in big numbers with the right support, the right upgrades, it's something where usually you want Ghosts to counter those. And Ghosts give up momentum because they're a very immobile unit. They're an energy unit that needs to build up a lot of energy over time and then value over time by taking small skirmish trades and then doing things like Nuke Harass. So I think it's just a stylistic choice here. I know from my own experience as a low GM Terran, I started playing Ghost Lib recently in the late game, spamming Nukaras, and I started smashing a lot of Zerg players who go to that stage. So I feel like it's only really when you're playing, you know, the best Zergs in the world that they're really good at using the kind of Spellcaster, Broodlord, Ultralisk combos. I think up until you get to that point, you can absolutely play the late game as Terran. But it's something where most Terran players opt to try to focus on the middle stages, focus on the early game, and kind of go from there. So it definitely changes that up a little bit. But yeah, long story short, Terran can play late game. It's very turtly. Most Terrans prefer to try and win in the early or mid game because the natural way you're playing with Bio is hyper aggressive.
Ghost Lib tagging's pretty good. People are wanting to see how swaps between army and production like during fights and as he's marching across.
I'm actually just opening up the first game. He basically, you guys can actually watch his stream. You'll get a lot more out of it than watching this, but I'll talk about it very fundamentally in a moment. I'm just opening up the Redshift replay, guys, because I'm trying to remember what happened on this game. I feel like this was a half-decent game. The last game, of course, was just a build counter. As soon as I saw Serral start Overlord speed in that game, and Alair, I knew he was doing the same all-in he used at Hero Marine back in Austin, I believe it was Austin. In one of their games, and I was like, oh yeah, he's doing a queen drop all in Ravager Ling bust, and Innovation was playing like Hellion Banshee or something, which just like loses to it. I can't remember. I think it was a Hellbat timing like into Banshees, which is just like the worst possible thing because you're like Hellbats and like Roaches have just popped to defend it. And then, yeah, the Ravager Ling Queen drop counter is just unstoppable because your Banshees don't defend against Queens that drop out of Overlords and an Overseer that makes. So we're gonna fast forward through this game. So it was how does Innovation swap between army management and production? Very smoothly with huge focus on his detail, amazing mouse accuracy, and he very smoothly produces off his control groups, which you've got to remember, guys, as a Terran player is one of the most important things is being able to produce units off those hotkeys, those control groups, especially in the late game when you don't need to do things like build supply depots, when you're not dropping as many mules because you're saving more energy for scans to constantly clear up creep. Oh my god, Serral is such a dick. I love it. Just those couple of things. Innovation didn't want to show it was a 2-on-1. He wanted to get ready to load in the medevac. Takes a bit of damage there. So we're going to watch this one from Innovation's camera for a little bit here. And you're going to see him bounce around. Now, Innovation is pro-Korean, so you're going to see him double tap his control group, number 1, to zoom to his medevacs and marines. And then he is also going to use his camera locations to spawn, to move between his bases. So a lot of the time, even though it kind of pans the camera just a little bit, basically you're going to see like there, he zooms to his main just by using a camera location. Picks up. All right, let's talk about what he just did there. Because it happened so fast. He picked up and clicked these medevacs back, and then he went home, and he said, gas, gas. Let's watch that again really slowly, because this is so funny. It's like so hard to catch. So he's like, let's go in. Goes back, boxes the SCVs. No, okay, he does it in a sec. Just there, he bounced home, and he just kind of checked his base. And he kind of just goes back and checks what's going on. I don't think he even queued anything there. Just then, he selected his barracks and queued it up, I believe. Selects the medevacs, he goes there, bounces home, drops the gases, because he knows exactly what he's got to do at each point, queues up more marines. His factory and starboard thing there, he tells those to unload, bounces back to his army at the front. This is not what you want to copy. You guys aren't fast enough. Don't do it. Don't try and imitate the way he moves around. Try and find your own rhythm, right? So for Innovation, he's just like, bam, bam, bam. Check army, check main. Check army, check main. Do this. I know exactly when this happens in my build. I know exactly when this happens. So this is not something you want to necessarily learn to do. It's something you want to aspire towards in the very long run if you're a hardcore StarCraft player. The main thing that you would focus on here is not glancing at these units as much, right? So what he's essentially doing is he's really, whenever he clicks his units out of harm's way, like down here, he picked up, he clicked them there, the drop. And then he goes home and does macro, because he only needs half a second to go home, and he's going to go bam, bam, drop depots when needed, do. For you guys, what you would probably have done is you would have gone pick up, Q to move there, and then unload there on the minimap, and then you go back and you're like, cool, I got 20 seconds, and you're like, add me upgrades, start my third command center, add my barracks, add my factories, my starports, and you're going to be able to do it that way. But you need to make 100% sure that you're giving yourself enough time out of danger. And that's what Innovation is doing here. Now notice Innovation, what he does is he literally scans, kills tumors, clicks the Marines back like this tiny distance, and then goes back to macro. Because he knows he's going to finish his little macro task, his macro cycles, adding upgrades, whatever else, in 2 seconds, and glance back before any Ling Bane could hit. But if you're not at that level of APM, you might click these Marines and Medevacs this far back. So even if your opponent runs out randomly with some Banelings or Roaches to fight them, your units are going to be running back for safety, giving you another 10-second window before you need to look at your army. Otherwise, you get punished. So this is something a lot of players, they look at pro Terrans and they say, I'm going to just do this. Look at how much he's looking at his army. I'm going to do that too. You don't need to do this because you're going to fuck up your own macro rhythm. You're not going to give yourself enough time to do your other tasks, and you're going to be trying to do things faster than you're capable of. So you can look at some of the fundamental rules. Like he's like, all right, go on, unload there. And I'm pretty sure he's going to go macro. We're not on his camera, are we? Maybe not. Maybe not. I guess he doesn't need to macro right now. Normally you'd bounce home here while you're waiting to unload and you'd macro. He sends a Marine to the watchtower, goes home, puts down a depot in half an instant. Actually, it was an armory. Knowing he needs to start his 2-2, he's building more depots. He's going to come forward here. And then he's going to pick up. He's putting so much APM into it because he can do that without missing a beat with his macro. You guys need to be a little bit more slowed down where it's like 20 seconds micro, 20 seconds macro, 20 seconds micro, 20 seconds macro. And that's how you're going to do it.
Upgrade complete.
You're saying I'm worse at macro than Innovation? Absolutely, Everest Stand. Absolutely. Stop trying to play like Innovation is my #1 piece of advice to all Terrans.
Yeah, I've seen it explained as fill in the dots for late game Terran. So you're just staring at your army, grabbing your rally points, but you're just filling in the dots on the barracks on the like command card.
Yeah.
You're like constantly producing.
That's a great way of thinking of it, isn't it? It's like, yeah, you just kind of, you don't need to build depots. Dropping mules isn't as important or as regular a thing. It's like, yeah, you just like, every now and then you just select your barracks, you know, Marauders, Marines, siege tanks, medevacs, or whatever units you need. So you're just kind of doing it that way.
Someone was asking about Vikings in the previous game, like why didn't, you know, go Vikings, and, you know, are they undervalued to take out the Vipers and as harass?
Against Bio, when you're playing Bio, your Marines can kind of take out the Vipers. It's tough, don't get me wrong. I've literally never seen Vikings off Bio against Vipers. I feel like you'd be better off getting to Ghosts at that point. It's just funny because I'm like, this is actually one of those things where pros don't do that. I don't do that because I've never seen anyone better than me do it. I've never even thought about getting Vikings as a Bio Terran unless they're going Broods. I'm like, I mean, it kind of makes sense, and that could work out okay for you. I think what's more important is just spreading your shit out, and if they get enough, and often what you'll do is, say you're Innovation right here, and your opponent has Vipers. Obviously, you'd be spreading those tanks out. You'd be like, make sure it's like bam, 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 like that sort of spread between your tanks, so a blinding cloud can never hit 2. And whenever you see Vipers come in, you want to just grab a group of Marines, stim them forward, and try to shift click them on their Vipers. And that can be huge. Now, obviously, if your opponent comes into the Hydra Ling Bane a little bit ahead of that, you can't do it. But that's actually a really interesting idea, is maybe it's worth it getting a few Vikings. I think, realistically, at that stage of the game, if you're adding these kind of like slower technical units to deal with the hive tech of Zerg, a couple of Ghosts with Sniper EMP do the job even better. So you'd be better off just getting a few Ghosts and trying to EMP those bad boys when they fly in, because that's a lot easier, whereas Marine obviously is very short-ranged. As I said, if they come in with the Hydra Bane, you're not going to get in range of the Vipers without hugging the Banelings at the same time. But yeah, often it's worth the risk. I often, even if there's like Ling Bane running in, I'll run like 12 Marines forward into that army if I think the Vipers are a little bit too far in front, and I can actually snap it down. Thank you very much, Little Niders, for the tier 2 resub, 2 months in a row, my friend. And Epsilox with that 46-month epic resub before. Thank you very much for the support.
I just had a question about the last game. You're saying that Innovation went 3 reactor, it was going super heavy with Marines. All I can remember is in Heartless Swarm...
6 reactors, just to be clear. But yeah.
6. He was making a huge amount of Marines. All I can remember is the Parade Terran. So, what do you think about Widow Mines in that situation? Because tanks kind of need to get up in high enough number to be crushing in a push, but Widow Mines can sort of work in smaller numbers.
Dude, I absolutely love that point. So, Widowmines suck against Hydras front on, right? So this is the reason for not doing it. Front on, you can't siege forward into Hydra Bane. Because the Hydra's outrange the Widowmines. With Overseers, they can kind of just gun them down. Forces the Marine Marauder forward, but then Banelings kind of come forward, and there's this very complicated micro dance, which I feel the Zerg is usually going to win in the long run, because their units are a little bit more expendable, and as the Terran, you're going to get punished a little bit more. It's just a bit harder to edge into creep, but you can split push. Gumiho at BlizzCon last year did exactly what you're talking about. He played a very heavy momentum style. I believe it was against a laser on Abyssal Reef. Maybe it was a Killer Zerg. Maybe it was a Korean Zerg. I can't. Maybe it's even against... Holy shit, was it against Serral? We're going to go VOD hunting, guys. Great play here by Serral, by the way. Just before we continue answering that question, Serral's play here was specifically predicated on denying the gold. I think going for the gold base is always a very iffy maneuver. I get why Terrans do it, but basically to sum this game up before we continue answering that question and go hunt for that VOD, which I'm going to, the drops just didn't really do any damage. Serral defended it flawlessly. Look at the units lost, and the creep spread doesn't really get slowed down. Serral was like still spreading creep in every single direction, and Innovation just didn't find the edge. And when you play this sort of style where you go fast double upgrades, then third CC, even little things like those Zerglings slowing Innovation down before actually was a pain in the ass. That actually adds up, because you're on such a fine razor's edge with this style, and you really need to keep all your Marines alive and find some damage or some momentum or to throw the Zerg off balance. He doesn't do that, so he then ends up in a very classic scenario here, where the Terran army is way better value in the long term. The higher the supply it gets, the higher the upgrades get, and the higher the siege tank count gets. However, Innovation gives Serral the easiest target, which is this gold base. Now, arguably, this is not a bad choice from Innovation, because at least he gets some mining, whereas there's no way you're moving out to take a third against a mass roach player when your 2-1-1 has gone this shittily. You're a madman if you do. You just don't have enough units. If the Zerg stops at 55, 60, even in this case 66 drones, and just holds down that roach key, exactly like Serral's doing, you're not going to be able to hang on. So at least with this style, you can just pull those workers away, float it back, and then once you've got enough tanks, you can very slowly crawl out front and take that base. But unfortunately, that's huge. His +2 attack gets delayed. When he hit 2-2 and his +2 armor, that would have been huge. But Serral already finding value, gets a few SCVs as well, and as I said, it's already a very hard position because he hasn't done any damage with his 2-1-1, and this is exactly why the 2-1-1 struggles if you don't find damage again with it. It's one of these builds which kind of is so micro-oriented and so tempo-oriented and so reliant on forcing your opponent to play overly safe or to do massive damage that we see this scenario where it's such a great defensive position, but there just isn't a lot of Terran. There's a double drop on the other side of the map, which is not here helping out. Every single unit kind of needed to be at home here for Innovation, and he's already bled out a few too many buildings and units and these sort of things. So I think Innovation here needed to play a little bit more turtley, pull his command center in, tuck his head in, play very conservatively behind that wall, and with the double drop, I get why he left it out there, because if he doesn't, he's got no information, and Serral might just drone the fourth and transition off the roaches. It's hard to spot. But if he got wind of how many Roach Ravager there was, he needed to have more units at home. And when that Roach Ravager came in, he needed to be like stimming a big ball of bio from here, a few units there, as well as having those siege tanks shooting, and he might have been able to get it. So we're going to very quickly do a little VOD hunt, guys, for this game, because I really love... that was Plox, right? It was? Who asked the question? It was Plox, right? Okay, cool. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's Plox, but let's just double check the Discord channel since I wasn't looking at it. We do have Archon in there as well. So, Gumiho Serral, WCS BlizzCon, what is it? WCS Global Finals? 2017. There's an Abyssal Reef. Oh, I cast this game. Look, there's me and we're the Wiggles. Orange shirt, blue shirt, Todd. Nice. It was versus Serral. Holy shit. Holy crap, guys. I was like, yeah, Gumiho did this versus Zerg on Abyssal Reef. So Gumiho is playing Widowmines. If you guys want this VOD, Serral vs Gumiho, ZvT, Group D decided, WCS Global Finals 2017. Just search Serral Gumiho, WCS Global Finals or BlizzCon, and you guys will find this game. Go to the Abyssal Reef game, And this is where Gumiho does a big bio pushing style. But as I said, it's against Hydrabane. Hydrabane Rex Widowmines, front on. So Gumiho split pushes this entire game long. I had the pleasure of casting this live with Todd. And yeah, we basically just watched, not only, of course, was this, not this necessarily the same level of Serral. Last year, he made it to 1 grand finals and had some good results and was pretty good. Made it to BlizzCon, went out in the group stage. This year, he's won every WCS event he's been to. He's won GSL versus the world. So maybe Serral's just a little bit stronger. But what was really cool here is basically Gumiho just kept pushing down through here, this left-hand side, and then he kept splitting half of his army and pushing through the north. And he did that repeatedly, over and over again. And he basically just kept running in from all these different angles. Like this screenshot here, if you look at this minimap, I know it's hard if you're on mobile. Basically, half his army of Biomine in the map is like, shit, too many units started back. He's got a huge army of Bio in the north at the same time, which we'll see in a moment. And that army will kind of run in on the top and kill a base or kill some units at the same time. So if you want to play a sort of endless kind of bio, momentum style with Widow Mines, I think split pushing and more drops are kind of how you take advantage of that. And we actually saw Gumiho go straight into mass range lib, which is how he was transitioning off this. It was his end game. Gumiho is a bit of a weird player, but he was already actually doing really well. Like he had a supply lead at some point, I'm pretty sure, in this series. I remember at some point, like he like sniped off the third and he was doing really well. But then Serral took a few amazing surrounds, and this game went for like 30 minutes or something crazy. Insane game 3. It actually goes for another 20 minutes past. It was like a half-hour game. Insane game 3. But I think if you want to play Widow Mines, that's what you're going to do. Was this before the Widow Mine nerf, says ANS? I don't think so. They nerfed the Widow Mines at like, what, the end of 2016, wasn't it?
It was at the end of October.
Wait, you mean end of November? It would have been after BlizzCon. Was it last year where they nerfed the Widow Mines?
I remember the patch came out before BlizzCon, but I don't remember if they actually applied it.
If it was last year, that would have come out. That's a good point, ANS. I don't honestly think them revealing themselves after shooting is the biggest deal. Like, definitely it matters a little bit. With this style, because there's normally an overseer, it's a small thing. I don't think it's like the biggest thing that's going to totally change these games at all. What do you think would happen if Banelings did friendly fire, says Locked? We'd see the Zerg player base drop drastically. It would break Zerg really badly. Locked. They would not work. Oh my god. Unravel says, have you looked at the Maru vs Serral game? Do you have those? Can we look at those? That's already up on my YouTube. I already looked at the Maru vs Serral game, which is one of the most flawless examples of just a very straightforward ZvT. So that's definitely something you can find over there. Is there a lesson to be learned by comparing Rogue versus Innovation and Serral versus Innovation? What is Serral doing that Rogue isn't? I'm actually going to be talking more about Innovation's TVZ in another day. I know I've talked a bit about Innovation today. I think it's good to look at things from the other side, but I'm going to actually do a separate show where I go over Innovation versus Rogue, and I'm going to look through those games and just talk about some of the details that make Innovation's play so good. I do think he got a bit lucky in that series, and he said it in his interview as well. There was like an incredible comeback on 16-bit where he was like way behind after his proxy racks got found, but he recovered the game. If we have any more, he recovered the game by Jesus, sorry guys, starts being super distracting. Girlfriend, we just got a mosquito slapper, but I've already killed them all. So if any more bugs piss me off this summer, I'm gonna be running around on stream smacking him with this. I like how it's got a butterfly imprinted on it, even though you're actually killing bugs. But yeah, Innovation came back because Rogue made like 40 roaches and then did nothing with them, which was a huge screw up on Rogue's part. Rogue has been falling into Dark Syndrome recently, in my opinion, and this is a little bit subjective, a little bit technical. It's 50-50 on my part because I'm a big Rogue fanboy. Rogue has been spotting... he's been playing overly safe. Like, Dark had this whole period where he was like, yeah, I'm going to open Gas Pool, Ling Speed into Overlord Speed and have the shittiest Zerg opening of all time because I think I'm better than every opponent I play, and I can just be safe. As long as I get this opening and then I go OV Speed, I'm safe against all cheese, and I will scout everything that comes my way. Rogue's been doing that sort of shit lately, and he's been playing overly safe, and because he's giving himself no room for error, small mistakes are getting him killed. So I think Rogue is definitely having some big struggles in terms of this. Just kind of being overly confident or something like that. Like it's the same reason in season 2 he lost to Maru in a series where he'd won the final game in the game 5, and then he went, yeah, cool, I just killed your push, better build 20 drones. He was already up 20 drones, queues up 20 drones, doesn't remake banelings. Maru unloads the medevacs like a screen away, stims back in, and there's no banelings and wins the game. And it was like, oh, you just won the game, Rogue, and then you threw it immediately afterwards. So Rogue's been throwing a fair few games recently. I know that's a harsh word, but when you're the best player in the world and you're playing games, like that game was an example where he went overlord speed and played super safe and super low on drones, and then still got in a winning position and then threw the game from there. Like he's kind of interrupting his own rhythm. He's not taking enough risks. Whereas I look at a young gun like Raynor, there's so many risks in his play. He's not playing safe at all, but he's making it work because he's just getting up there smoothly. He's attacking, he's harassing, he's kind of, I'm not saying Raynor's as good as Rogue. I don't think he is by any means, but he's definitely playing a more free-flowing style, whereas Rogue, it feels like he's just unnecessarily kind of gumming up his own play for no reason, and that is unfortunate to see.
We had a question about when is it a good idea to use lurkers defensively versus bio?
When is it a good idea to use lurkers defensively versus bio? Only if you're a strange player who enjoys playing a very weird style of super weird games. All right? If you guys enjoy playing really weird games, you can absolutely play that. End of Line is a cool player who does it. Grip, another. So those are a couple of streamers, Zerg streamers. You guys want to see some GM players play that sort of stuff? Go check those streamers out. And they all make it work at a GM level. You'll never see it at a pro level because players are just mechanically too good at avoiding the lurkers, dropping past them. They're not very mobile. And there is a big problem. There is a big problem, which is siege tanks and libs kind of just, they're always the supporting units, right? You're like, cool, I've got my lurkers, and they can just edge their siege tanks forward. So in some scenarios, your lurkers only really buy you time. There's also scenarios where if you don't have enough support for the lurkers because you're trying to cover all your bases from drops, your opponent just gets like a surround, comes in with their bio, and lurker splash is very bad if you get surrounded. So it's like this very weird style where it's hard to force your opponent out of the game because it's hard to attack with them. You can stall a lot, you can build a lot of static, you can play this messy, scrappy, weird game, and it can be a lot of fun, but it's a very stylistic choice. It's not something that is the correct strategic response to anything in particular. So yeah. Let's say a quick shout out. Trader Nick with a Twitch Prime sub and Oversized Pillow with a Twitch Prime sub as well. Much love, appreciate the support, guys. Thank you very much.
I missed the earlier games, but have you talked about Serral injecting?
Yeah, we talked about it in the previous episode. I don't know if it's really hard to catch in a replay how he injects, but basically we mentioned how like he actually uses all 3 methods and swaps between them. It's like really funny.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
I noticed a lot of. It looked like rapid fire at how fast it is. Like
in the mid game onwards, yeah, absolutely, it's rapid fire.
Yeah, it's rapid fire. Like it's so fast. I'm like, oh my god, and that seems to be like one of the things. It's so fast, and he's always got those units. Like he seems to squeeze out just a few more units on those holds.
Oh yeah, it's really fascinating because Eon Blue did some on the ground reporting for me, my mod at a few of the WCS events, and I chatted with Serral quite a bit and kind of watched him play and asked him about his mechanics. And Eon Blue was the one who said, yeah, he uses all 3 methods. So he starts off in the game usually just camera locationing. So like we just saw an inject there. So this, okay, let's go back actually to the early ones because he should be just camera locationing, and he's incredibly fast. So let's see. It's very easy for people to misunderstand each other when they're talking about mechanics, which is why I'm always skeptical when I say this stuff. I'm like, I think he does this. I always say I think because unless I've actually watched him play and had a long conversation while watching him play about it, I kind of don't trust anything anyone reports to me, and that's not Eon Blue being dumb, but yeah, that was camera locations. That wasn't rapid fire. So yeah, in the early game, Serral basically bounces to the camera location and he just injects the queen by boxing it and telling it to inject, and that's exactly what he did here. Yep. We're going to watch that one more time. But later on, you'll see it just go and he injects like 5 hatcheries. And that's because as he goes later in the game, precision isn't as important. So in the early stages, he needs every inject to land right on time without his queens running around trying to inject other hatcheries. And he also needs to have a clear differentiation between defense queens. Notice he's got 3 queens on number 2 and injecting queens, which are on number 5. Now, he doesn't have a 3rd injecting queen right now. So what he's going to do on his next inject cycle is he's going to zoom to his bases, and when he injects with this queen, he'll also shift 5 it, unless he needs to pull it into his defense key, in which case he might consolidate all of his queens. And this is one of the things, there's very few hard and fast rules with Serral and his hotkeys. He's one of the smoothest players at swapping between what he does with his control groups, and that's just the coolest thing. So there we go. Yeah, just then, that 3rd queen got added into that control group. So he's bringing all his queens down to make sure that lib gets rid of, and he's realizing, oh shit, those Hellions are coming back in. So he's already A-moved those queens and sent the drones back to mine. So he says, look, I don't need to micro that at all anymore. He goes back, sends the drones back to mining, and says, okay, cool. We're building 12 more lings, but not just that. He actually used his control group of queens to A-move his queens down there because he realized he needed support. Let's find the exact moment. This is so sick, man. Just how quick he does this. So he actually selects number 5 and A-moves it to the Hellions, knowing number 2 has already gone to deal with the libs. We're going to catch it. Yeah, he just did it then. Did he do it then? I think he did it then. I try to always catch it. It's really hard. I'm like watching behind me. You guys can see what he has selected underneath me. There we go. He's just selected his queens and aim. Yeah, he's selected control group 5 and A-moved here. So that queen, and one of the queens from the 3rd base is on that control group as well. Yeah, it's this queen. You see, the other ones didn't get a new command. They were still on lib duty. That queen comes to defend the Hellions. I love the way he does that. So that's actually really cool. So what I often do is I actually will just detach an extra queen to defend the lib along with the queen that's already on the base, and I'll like remove it from my control group. But Serral's like, no, we can just have 2 different control groups, and then he might consolidate them a bit later when he says, we're just going to use rapid fire injects. I need my APM later on to be more focused on my army control, my counterattacks, and I've got more hatcheries to inject. So he just says, fuck it. He'll throw all the queens on one control group and he'll do it that way. Anyway, we talked about it in this previous video, so I don't want to talk about it too much longer. Any other good questions, guys?
We talked about how Widowmines somehow on front-on engagements they'll die to Hydras since they outrange them. Again, I played a lot during Heart of the Swarm, and I remember Hellbat pushes surviving very readily. I just see in this game the tank push has just gotten surrounded very easily and never really got up that huge tank count that could obliterate in one shot. So where'd that go? What about Hellbats?
So the problem with Hellbats is that Banelings destroy them. There's this super weird dynamic where Hellbats are meaty as all hell and they do so much damage to Lings. Like Lings are so bad versus them. But what always happened was the Zerg would just make more Banelings. So what you give up when you go Hellbats as opposed to Widowmines or tanks is you have no big splash damage to punish big clumps of Banelings. Now Banelings are the slower moving unit. They clump up a lot no matter what, especially when you're control clicking them towards Marines. So they just get destroyed by tanks and Widowmines, right? So as a Zerg, the Zerg play is relatively light on the Banelings. They have just enough to kind of get some spread through the army towards the Marines, right? To punish Marines. And that forces the Marines to spread out, which allows the Lings to be way more effective, as well as the Banelings do sometimes connect. But let's face it, most of the time the Banelings aren't really connecting against a big tank army or a big Widowmine army. A lot of it's just the Lings and the Mutas or the Lings and the Hydras doing the fighting. It's the Banelings forcing the Terran to not stay in a big ball, because a big ball just fucks Zerglings. It just destroys them, right? But what the Zerg does when they realize there's Hellbats is they say, oh, don't make many Hydras, don't make many Mutas. I mean, Hydras are still good because they can outrange them. But like back when it was Lingbane, Muta, and Hots, what you would do is you'd say, stop making Mutas, don't make more. And you just put all your gas into Banelings, and you would just blow up the Hellbats instantly. And even when they were spread really well, because there was no way to punish the Banelings coming in this one big kind of ball or a big flank, 2 big balls, the Hellbats would just never get a chance to hit the Zerglings. And there would just be too much Lingbane, and it would just overwhelm. And this has always been the experience. And it's this weird thing, because it kind of doesn't make sense. You're like, but what if the Marines and Hellbats are spread enough? And it just never seems to work, because there's never enough Hellbats out. I don't know if it's a timing issue, because you can't afford to get a second factory and Blue Flame if you're just building Hellbats 2 at a time, right? You can't afford to get sick Hellbat upgrades either. because you're focusing on your bio upgrades. And there's this thing where Flash played this style for a long time, and as long as the Zerg always waited for enough Banelings, when they crashed through, they would destroy his army. So basically, if he ever went on creep, he would get wrecked. And he would be very methodical, moving around off creep. Remember, Flash was very good in Heart of the Swarm. He was one of the best Terrans in the world. He'd move around, he'd look like he's ahead for so long, and there'd always just be one fight where the Hellbats would just all die and they just wouldn't do anything, because I think it's a lot to do with the fact that your units automatically clump in StarCraft. Your units will clump together, and that's why Hellbats couldn't be effective, right? They're just always inevitably going to clump up when you're pushing somewhere at least a little bit, but you also don't want to be so spread across 3 screens that your units aren't really supporting each other, and the Lingbane can kind of fight a section of your army at a time if they come in all consolidated. So it's this weird thing where even to this day, as I'm saying it, I'm like, it sounds wrong, because surely you can just spread more and replace more Hellbats, and the Baneling trades have got to be inefficient, but it just never works out that way, and that's kind of, I guess, the complexity of the StarCraft physics with how these engagements work, and sometimes you just kind of learn this through experience, because for a while players were really struggling versus it, but once we saw Sue just ruffle stomp it time and again by making a silly Baneling count, we were like, oh, this style is just not that good. So I think against most players, they won't realize how heavy they need to go on Banelings. You could smash some people on ladder. Same way, you guys, if you're like Marauders, you can actually go 2 or even 3 Tech Labs against Zerg, especially if you're going Widow Mines. The Marauders are so tanky, the Lingbane clumps up around it, Widow Mines get massive shots, and your opponent just doesn't get to the juicy Marines that you keep behind the Marauders. But if you play good enough players, they flank, they go heavier on the Zergling count. Zerglings do beat Marauders. They still have enough Banelings to get on top of the Marines. And they'll adjust their composition and kind of how they micro, and they will be able to overwhelm you. But both Hellbats and heavy Marauder count, skipping on the raw damage of the Marines, both of these compositions work very well until you're facing very good Zerg players who really understand how to use Lingbane. That's always an interesting little topic to talk about there. So we're going to be finishing up in a minute here, guys. Do shout out any last questions there in chat. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to ask, or anything that guys in chat were kind of taking a look at?
Not a lot going on.
It's called a fly swatter, someone was saying in chat. I know. Did I not call it a fly swatter? Did I call it a fly basher? I think that's a better name, to be honest.
A bug slapper, you called it.
A bug slapper? Yeah, actually, that's a way better name. Bug slapper? I'm definitely using that from now on. It's fucking bug slapper. This is what innovation needed in this game, guys. It's like, stop! Stop it, Banelings! Stop it! No! Get out of my mineral line! High level analysis only here in the Big Daily, guys. This is where you learn about StarCraft.
How come we don't see Infestors used versus Bio much at the pro level? Like, it's just straight A move, Lingbane Hydra with surrounds.
I think in the late game we've seen like Raynor and a few players start to use it really well. Rogue as well in certain situations, Dark sometimes. But I think it's just because the Hydra Bane is already so weak to tanks. So a lot of people, like in certain situations, right? Like we're almost always seeing a very slow, big parade tank push. Like Innovation was doing very clump tank pushes in this game because he wanted to just get on the bases and force the fights, and we saw that get doubly punished by Serral's surrounds, right? If these tanks were spread out more, Serral can't set up that flank as easily. But if you have Infestors and you're already engaging into a pre-spread with Hydra Bane, the Infestors have the same problem the Banelings and Hydras have if you can't really close with the tanks, and you kind of pay the tanks off almost. Like if your opponent is playing mostly bio, you'll get good value. In a movement focused game, you'll get good value, you know. Anytime there's bio clump, they're really nice, and they're nice over time. It's just one of those things where people are so focused on the Hydra Bane with the current meta that it's like you're going heavy on tanks, Infestors just can't get in range of these pushes. You might get like one surprise wave of fungals off because they don't know you've got Infestors, but even that's hard because they're always scanning ahead of their army. And Vipers, obviously, we see come out often as the moment where the Terran's like, I've got too many tanks, you can't fuck with this. Infestors don't help with that scenario. Vipers are the perfect thing, though, right? We see them land those blinding clouds. The Terran's like, cool, I got 8 tanks, I got 2-2, let's go. And they don't realize Vipers are out, the tanks are too clumped, blinding clouds kill everything, and you're like, okay, I see why Vipers are the better option. I think if they still had Pyrofungal, we might see a few more people using Infestors still in the mid game.
Please give back Pyrofungal. I want a fat.
It was so broken, man. I remember when they first announced it, I was like, no, don't do that. It's like, that's unfair. I'm like, I love my, and I won so many games of those Infestors. Holy shit, it's so dumb, man. I remember getting so tilted as well. Like late game TVZ gets really scrappy. They've still got Infestors out, and I'm like, well, I don't have a Raven, and I'm out of scans, and like, I'm just like frantically trying to spread my army every time I move it around the map, because there's just so many games I lost to like a random burrow boy just following my army around and be like, herp you derp, Fungal lands on 80% of my army, GG, and I was like, oh, fuck this stupid fucking thing.
Did Inno get a second factory this game? Or did he just stay on one?
It was one, yeah. This was like super. I'm just gonna push. Like he went for his extra 3 barracks so fast. Like it was like, that's why it was so devastating when he lost his tanks. Like those pushes getting screwed. Like that, the 6 tanks dying, the first 6 tank push. Honestly, that's probably what spelled the good game here for Innovation. I think he needed to spread those tanks out more and probably actually be a little bit more patient with it as well. I think he felt like he traded okay with the counterattacks, and so he had the momentum and his reinforce would be good enough because Serral wouldn't be able to engage it straight away. And we saw that wasn't the case. Serral's macro was just on point, and he got on top of it very quickly. So if those tanks survived, that would have been amazing, right? Like if there was any situation where they both trade armies and Serral loses his whole army and there's still like 3 tanks left and Innovation maintains position, Serral's dead. Because, you know, he's if he loses position and his creep gets pushed back, the bio reinforce is insane, as long as there's some tanks supporting. But at this point, Innovation was in full-on impotence town. Someone get that man a Viagra, because his army does not stand up straight without a bunch of siege tanks holding it up firm. Marines and Marauders on their own are, yeah, rather senile, and it's not the strongest Terran army. Let's just say it that way. It's
Someone
the
asked why he didn't go. Oh yeah.
Saving Gaming was wondering, how did Serral decide to go for Wingbane Hydra this game instead of Roach Ravager like he did previously?
Oh, that's what I was asking anyway. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, someone was asking about that same build the other day. They were saying, hey, what do you think of Serral's Roach Ravager into Ling Bane style? And I was like, what? That's not a style. I was like, which one do you mean? I was like, and then they're like, oh, you know, it was on Redshift against Innovation. I was like, oh, that's a special Redshift build. So I was talking about this on stream the other day. This is the last little bit before we finish up, guys. Essentially, Redshift, the Roach Ravager there is just like, hey, I'm going to make sure you can't get the gold base. Whereas if he plays Ling Bane, Innovation gets to mine off that gold. Remember, Innovation got to mine off his gold on Redshift for about 40 seconds. And then there was Roaches there and he had to pick up and go somewhere else. Not just that, but 2-on-1 is very common. I think he knew he was playing against 2-on-1. He said, I'm going to play Roach Ravager. As long as I don't take any damage, I'm going to be able to get 3 bases worth of drones. I'm going to roll across the map, and I'm just going to have too much stuff. And I'm going to overwhelm you with some really aggressive Roach Ravager. I'm going to deny your gold base because I know you're going to go for that gold base, and I can't let that go up. This way I'm going to let it go up because Hydras are a lot later than Roach Ravager. Roach Ravager's a lot faster. So he was like, cool, I'm going to deny the gold, potentially just kill you, because this is really, like, 2-on-1 struggles to get a third. If it doesn't do damage early, or really, like, at least slow the Zerg down, and it didn't, Serral's defense was lit. He's like, I'm going to kill you when you go for that third. In this case, he didn't even have to kill him when he went for the third. He was like, oh, your E-bays are in the wall? Cool! And he basically went off 66 drones to about 160, 170 supply of Roach Ravager, and already, when he was launching that assault in that game, he was droning behind it and trying to swap back into Ling Bane, and he was adding tunneling claws because he was like, well, if I can't take the trade, if there's too many tanks here, I need some way to trade these Roaches off, because the bigger the fights get, the worse the Roaches are in the big fights. But as it was, he was able to like kill the upgrades multiple times, kill a bunch of Marines and tanks. Inno comes out to take his third, and like he's already like way behind, and Serral just overwhelmed him with raw numbers. So that was a very special build for that map and that matchup. I think Roach Ravager styles in general are really good. You can go into Ling Bane off them, or into like Roach Hydra Viper or something like that. It's always a little bit finicky though, because they suck at max out. So you've got to find your timings. You've got to hit your timing attack hard, trade with your opponent when you've got the unit advantage. That's why really good Terrans will sit behind walls, they'll add extra bunkers, they'll have spread out tanks, and they'll often even pull SCVs to buffer. Because what you'll see often with that sort of big 3-base attack is the Terran loses 20 workers, but keeps his whole army alive, and it's game over. The Terran is so far ahead at that point, even though they're like way down at half the worker count, because the Zerg's like, well, I'm rebuilding my 1/1 Roach Ravager, and the Terran's like, yeah, I'm dropping triple mule. I'm basically on equal economy, but guess what? My 2/2's kicking in. Oh, and I've still got 6 tanks alive. Soon that's going to be 8 tanks. Ton of Marine Marauder. You can't stop that push. Hell, I don't even need to push. I can take a 4th and play it really slow because you're forced to rebuild Roach Ravager to defend a potential counterattack, and Roach Ravager just sucks the longer the game goes. So that's why Roach Ravager creates a scenario of Zerg really wants to fuck Terran up. Terran wants to just be like, just let me survive. Just let me survive. I'll beat you in the long run. And that's the real dynamic that we have in that scenario. So guys, thank you very much for watching. I don't think I chose the best replays for this one. Next one we're going to do is Stats PVT. Following that, we're going to do Innovations Terran vs. Zerg vs. Rogue. So we're going to look at some amazing Protoss vs. Terran where Stats takes Maru on a one-way trip to D-Town. Destination Eft, as we like to call it. Wow, I'm suddenly so PC. PC? Sorry, not PC. PG. PG-13+. After that, we've still got other games. We've got some great, like, Innovations TVT versus Special is one we can look at. Dark versus Classic, some Zerg versus Protoss, as well as, of course, Stats versus Serral. Some juicy games. So I'm just going to keep doing this sort of show where you guys get to talk about stuff on call with me. Well, a couple of the mods, whoever happens to be around, will hop on call and read questions. You guys in chat can ask questions. We can start discussions while we point out some of the details of what the best players in the world are doing right now in their strategies. Thank you very much for hanging out, guys. We'll catch you all next time. Goodbye and good night.